We're going to talk in this area about the missing pupfish. So first I have to find out what you guys know about pupfish. So the first question I have, I'm going to ask you to use your hands, your fingers, your arms, whatever you want. I want you to show me how big is a pupfish. Kind of show me how big is a pupfish. Wow, this group thinks pupfish are really big. How about you, Ashley? How big is a pupfish? Little tiny things? You guys are right. Yeah, they're little tiny things. They're about that size. And the pupfish we have here, there's lots of different kinds of pupfish, but the one that was in this area was the Owens pupfish. And it lived along the ponds and the creeks and the streams here. It even lived in the Owens River, but it doesn't anymore. As a matter of fact, for a long time we didn't think there were any pupfish left, but they're here. We still have pupfish, but we have to figure out what happened to them. That's our job today. We're going to be detective scientists. And we get to figure out what happened to the Owens pupfish. Okay? So let's learn a little bit more about them. Okay? This is about the size and color. What do you think of that color?
Blue and silver.
Yeah, blue and silver. Very bright, huh? Yeah, very pretty. Pupfish are very pretty. Nice. There's a picture of the male pupfish. A lot of times we get them confused with pufferfish that live in the oceans that they puff up when they're in danger. Pupfish do not do that. It's P-U-P, pupfish, and they get their names because they have kind of an aggressive behavior. They like to chase away their enemies, or when they're in the water, they play and chase each other's tails, and the biologist who saw them do that thought they were acting like little puppy dogs, so he called them pupfish. So that's how they get their name. That's what the name comes from, is pupfish. And then the other picture here, this is another one. And now, the males are actually the brighter colored ones. Females are much duller. These are the males. The females are very dull. Actually, I think these are both males, but anyway. So the females are very dull. And in nature, sometimes that's the case. The males are much prettier than the females. They have all the pretty coloration because they're trying to attract a girlfriend. So they have to be very bright colored. Yeah. All right. So we're going to learn more and more about pupfish as we go and try and figure out what happened to them. But how many of you like detective stories or mysteries? All right. So when the person trying to solve the mystery, or the detective, sometimes they have kind of fancy equipment, don't they? Like Scooby. And what does Scooby have to solve mysteries? What does he have? Well, he has a talking dog, which we are definitely not going to have today. What else?
He has a crew to help him out, and they have like the brains, everything like that. They need to find the stuff that they.
You said the magic word.
The brains.
The brains. We're not going to have really fancy equipment out here. We're not going to have magnifying glasses or computers. We are going to have each other, but we have to have the brains. So we have this, like smart stuff. We have to be the smart stuff. So we have to use our brains. We also have to use our senses. Okay, so that we can observe or hear or smell the different things to help us figure out what happened to these pupfish. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is see if we can use our sense of sight. We're going to go around the corner and look for, what are mystery detectives, what do they look for? What are those things called?
Clues.
A little louder.
Clues.
Clues. We're going to look for clues. So we're going to go around the corner, and I thought so, then see if we can find clues to something else that may live here. You guys can hear chirping. I'll just have everybody close your eyes, and I'm going to ask you to just listen for about 30 seconds and point in the direction. If you hear the chirping, if you hear a bird, point in the direction, but keep your eyes closed. Keep your eyes closed. All right, keep your hands up where you're pointing and open. Do you see any birds over there?
No, but it does say stuff in them.
No, but they're probably in that huge tree.
There's one. So we don't always see the clues. Sometimes we have to use our other senses, like our hearing. What's another sense we might have to use today? Smell, yeah, smell. We probably won't use taste today, but the smell is a good clue too, good way to looking at clues. And what about feeling? Touch, yeah, we're definitely going to use that one today. We're not going to touch the nest, though. Okay, so this just gives us our clues. Okay, so I want you to turn to page 1. It's the very first page, written page in the book. Page 1. Page 1. going to talk about a couple of things today as this one is native versus non-native. What's it mean to be native versus non-native, or native versus introduced? Yes, Nathan.
One's native.
What does that mean? What does it mean to be native?
I mean, I've seen. Oh.
Okay. How about Ashley? What do you think?
Does it mean that it just naturally is here?
Yeah, naturally here. It's been here for a very, very long time. And we think of, like myself, I'm an introduced Californian. I was born in Nevada. I wasn't born in California. So I'm an introduced Californian. I would be, if I were still in Nevada, though, I'd be a native Nevadan. So the things that have been here for a long time, that belong here, that live here, those are native. So do you think our birds that are here, what do you think, native or introduced?
Native.
Some could be
Native.
introduced.
What would be a bird that was introduced?
The eagle.
Well, crows and eagles have been here for a long time. They both
Tweety
have been there for a long time. You mean like the cartoon Tweety Bird? If the cartoon Tweety Bird showed up here, yes, you are correct. It would have to be introduced because this is not its native habitat. Yes, Ashley.
Parakeets.
Parakeets, yeah, parakeets were not here. Hey, we might have one at home and somebody may bring it here. Oh, he's talking up there. So parakeet would be a good example of introduced. Okay, all right.
Look, I see another nest.
Very good. Always, yeah, keep looking with those eyes. You're going to see lots of stuff today. And a feather. Very good. We got lots of bird stuff here, huh? Lots of clues, lots of evidence that there's birds. So now we have to figure out, most important question on that page, because it takes us right back to what we're trying to do. We're trying to solve that mystery.
So are they native? Don't we have
So-
to? I think I know why birds are here.
So the birds, think about the birds. How might they affect the pupfish? Tyler, are you going to answer the question? Did you have another one?
I probably know how the pupfish is going.
Okay, if you have a theory
Maybe.
and you think you know the answer, write it on the cover of your book. Okay? Because at the very end, we'll find out if you're right.
This.
But we won't tell everybody now. Now you just have to kind of keep it in your head, write it down, right on the cover of the book. If you have a theory, if you've decided right at this point, I know what happened to the pupfish, go ahead and write it down. And then we'll come back to that question. How do you think birds affect pupfish?
The birds.
So, okay, go ahead, Jaden. What do you think that?
The birds ate them.
You think the birds might
Because
eat
birds
pupfish?
eat fish.
Ah,
That's what
do
I
all
wrote.
birds eat fish?
No.
No. Do you think all the birds here would have eaten fish?
No.
No, maybe a few that live maybe near the water. They might eat fish.
That's what I wrote.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe that might be one theory of what happened. But there might be a lot of other things to think about, and we're going to start looking at some of those. Don't shout out an answer. Put your hand up. Look at this water, and keep looking. And when you see something kind of cool, put your hand up. Put your hand up. Okay? And keep looking. You might see more. You might even have two hands up.
I see little fish.
All right. I'm going to start on the end with Ashley. Ashley, tell me one thing that you're seeing.
I see the dirt coming up right there.
Yeah, it's kind of bubbling up. It kind of reminds me of a picture you see on TV or on the movies or something that looks like volcanoes erupting, and it's kind of bubbling up. And what that is that's water coming up. These are springs. And way out there, and we can see where the snow is in the mountains, many years ago, snow like that sunk down. It kind of was absorbed by all the ground, got down to ground, and it flows underwater until it finds a crack. And then it bubbles up to the surface. So these are springs. These are all water. Ah, lucky you. All right. So Tyler, tell me one other thing you see.
They remind me that in Victorine, there's a pupfish ponds on the side of the mountain, and I go swimming there.
Stuff like that. Yeah, kind of very similar ponds. So tell me one other thing you see in here.
Crawdads digging, maybe.
Oh, I didn't see any crawdads. Yeah. How about Jaden? What else do you see in there?
I see like little fish.
Little fish.
Little and big fish over there. I don't know what kind they are.
Oh, and there's a big fish. Yeah, there is a big fish running over there. We're going to turn this.
Tyler, they're tiny fish.
And there's a little fish. And Justine, what do you see?
I have what's digging
Okay.
I noticed that like springs.
Oh, yeah, there's some white stuff. And if you look around the edges, you'll see there's more white stuff.
And
Yeah. And what else?
there's things digging two springs bubbling out there.
Yeah, there's at least two springs. What else do you see on the bottom?
And the
What
I
else
see
do you
dirt
see?
moving.
You see dirt moving. What else do you see?
I don't know. Like that.
What else do you see? Does anybody see that kind of greenish clumpy stuff?
Yeah. No.
All right.
That's moss.
Well, but some people call it mud, but it's actually algae. We're going to talk a little bit more about the algae.
Tell me what
And if
that
you
is.
look, you'll also see some rocks out there. And where the water is bubbling up, look at that nice sand that's coming up with it. Yeah, that nice gravel that's right there.
It's digging.
Yeah. What about all this stuff on the edge? What's all this? Oh, let's go over here and take a look at this stuff. Soft? What else does it feel like? Try,
It feels like
try twirling it.
It feels like a square.
Like a square?
Triangle.
How many sides? Oh, like a triangle.
Three.
It has 3 sides, doesn't it? All right, open your book to page 4. Open your books.
Shut these down right here.
Yeah, you can. Open your book to page. You'll see this has got, now that one doesn't, but this one does. It's that tricorn shape. And if you look on the page, you'll see one that has a nice tricorn, a nice triangle shape. These are a little flatter, huh? Different plant.
But we don't have any. Oh.
Yeah, different shape. All right, so you want to circle that triangular plant, because you've seen that one. And then some folks are noticing that there's another plant right by it that has smooth leaves. Yeah, let's go over here and we'll get a better look at those. Cattails! Look on your page. Is there a picture of a cattail?
Yeah.
Yeah. Has everybody got a cattail circled?
I want to feel the brown things.
Okay. Now we're going to head back, turn around, and have a seat on our chart. Okay. Right? We've seen those. But there's 3 plants. Did we see that third plant? Oh, that's actually part of a cattail. Yeah. That's the base of a cattail. That third plant, which we call a bulrush, isn't here. And the reason it isn't here is because the scientists have taken it away.
No. Why?
Why? Good question. Because it wasn't here originally. It was brought here because a lot of people thought it'd be very nice to have along the ponds, but its roots will actually move in and take over the roots for the cattails and on the sedges. So if it was brought here, what kind, is it a native plant or an introduced plant?
Introduced.
Yeah, what do you think the cattails and the sedges are?
Native.
Native, yeah. So we didn't want that introduced plant taking over the native ones, so they took it out. So that's why we can no longer circle that middle plant. It's not here anymore. So most of the plants that are here, are they native or introduced now? Native. So you want to make sure and circle native on your page. So how do you think the pupfish would use this? We'll call it vegetation because that's on the title of the thing. How do you think that the pupfish are going to use these plants that are here? How do you think they might use the plants?
They eat them.
They might hide in them.
They might bring them down. And then
They're very tiny.
Might feed their baby.
Might feed their babies with it. Okay. Well, you're kind of close. The big plants, they actually could be a good place to hide if the pupfish were trying to hide. But remember, the pupfish, they're kind of aggressive because they were the only fish here. They didn't have to hide a lot. They might want to hide from the birds. But the one thing they did is there's the other plant in here, is the algae, and you can touch it. You can.
I'm not touching that.
You don't have to.
One of my friends has a pond and it has
Lots of algae, yeah.
They
You can touch it.
eat that?
Very good. That's exactly what they do, Jaden. They eat the algae.
hair.
It does feel like wet hair, doesn't it?
I do.
Yeah. It's kind of squishy, kind of nasty in some ways, yeah. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah. Oh, we'll get to that in a second. So here's our algae. This is our pupfish food. But you may have noticed if you looked, or if you bend over and look in, you'll see there's little things moving in there too.
Oh, they're bugs.
Look on page 5.
Oh, yeah, we don't have magical glasses.
There is a fancy word at the very top of page 5,
I know what they are.
Aquatic invertebrates.
which means, what do you think?
Are they a skug? Skug?
One's a scud. Yeah.
It means snake.
Scuds are in here.
Very good, very good. In some ways, it kind of does translate almost to water bugs.
Scuds are in here.
Could we catch
So it means water things that don't have a backbone. So, all right, so they're omnivores. They eat everything. And sometimes it's just because they're swimming along, they come into the algae, they're eating the algae, and there's something swimming around, and they'll eat that too. I kind of like the term opportunivore. They eat whatever they have an opportunity to eat. But they're called omnivores, so they eat both. So we eat both the plants and the animals. So when you think about those plants and the animals, you know, it might be if there wasn't enough of them, what would happen to the pupfish?
They would die.
They would die. But look at all the algae in there. There's a lot of algae in there, isn't there?
Yeah, for one. small things.
Yeah, they're like
Yeah,
this
for
big.
small things, yeah. And you think of just all the little bugs that we saw in here, just in that little bit. So there's probably a lot of aquatic invertebrates or bugs in there too. So that's, wow, maybe that's not why they're missing. Huh. What about the water? You think maybe there might be something wrong with the water and that's why they're missing?
It's dirty.
Maybe it's dirty? Should we find out?
Yeah.
Let's find out something about this water. We'll do a couple of things because pupfish are kind of picky about a couple of things. Like they have to have a certain temperature of the water and a certain type of clean water. So let's do that. Alright, I need 2 volunteers. Alright. Wouldn't this water be really cold? Yeah, but it's not. It's very warm water. It's very warm water. It's about 50. Around 50. Nope, no, because that's not what your teacher wants you to write everything in scientific terms, which would be Celsius. That's what scientists do. So, then it asks, what pupfish like? How do pupfish like it? So, here we have some information on our pupfish. Pupfish like to live between 0 and 45. What was our temperature?
20.
20 is right kind of in the middle, right? That's pretty good. And something that maybe it was polluted, maybe it's got some bad things in it. One way to tell that, we call it the pH. It's kind of the chemicals that are in it. So we're now going to figure out the pH of this water and figure if that might be the problem. See if that's the problem, if the water's the problem. So everybody, I'm going to give you a piece of my magic pH paper.
It's chocolate.
It does look like the chocolate candies, I know. Every time I open it up, I keep thinking I'm giving myself chocolate, but it's not. It's just paper. So what I'm going to ask you to do is you're just going to hold the top, okay? So I give you a piece. Just hold the top very carefully. So we're going to hold it up. Everybody's going to dip. Everybody hold it up close on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, dip, and then just take it out. Dip, take it out, and hold it up, and keep an eye on it. What's it going to do? Next thing I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to pass this around, and I want you to match your color to the color that's on this paper, and remember the number, and then write the number on the very top of your page on page 3. Okay, pH 7, right up on the top of page 3. Did anybody get something other than 7?
No.
No. Okay, so this time everybody got 7. Good. So now we're going to look at that number tells us what kind of condition this water is. What kind of, whether it has bad chemicals or if it's what they call acid or basic. But number 7 is right in the middle. That green color is right in the middle. That means it's neutral, which means it's neither extreme. It's not too salty, it's not too acid, not too basic.
So we can drink it?
Actually, you probably could. I don't think it would do you any real harm. But then, again, we're mostly interested in the pupfish. So could the pupfish live in it? And pupfish they live best in water. Then it's on your page. So on your thing it says neutral green. Since all of you had neutral green, you can circle neutral green. Good. And then they live best between 7 and 10. So the next question is, what do they go from? 2, 7 to 10. That's their pH number. 7 to 10. And what was ours? 7. So we got good water, don't we? Yeah. And the other thing that a lot of times pupfish like water is a little bit salty. If you ever go out to Death Valley, there is a pupfish that lives in water that's really, really salty. About 2, 3 times the salt that you'd find in the ocean. So sometimes they actually can get used to saltier water. So they kind of like that salty or that basic end. Sometimes, but they usually like this. This is perfect water. Perfect water. Yeah. Is it the water that's the problem? Is that why the fish aren't here? No, because it's got great water. Well, let's see. What is this stuff? Let's see if we can discover maybe there's something wrong here. This is called mud, and it came from the very bottom. And I want you to feel it for me, but you don't have to if you want to, but I want you to either touch it with 2 fingers or 3 fingers and then rub it in your fingers, and I want you to describe it to me. So I want you to know how to do it. See if you can describe it.
Pinch it.
Yeah, just pinch it, take a little bit, rub it in your fingers.
Ooh, it's soft.
It's soft. Ooh, thank you. Good description. And did you want to do some, Jaden, or not? No? Okay. So what else? And how would you describe it? Is it sticky? You keep doing this. Is it sticky? kind of sticky?
It's sticky and bumpy. Sticky and bumpy.
Kind of bumpy. You can feel something bigger in it as well as the softness. Kind of sticky, soft,
Watery,
bumpy.
muddy, and rocky.
What, mucky? Well, that's a good word. That's a good word. All right. Well, we'll keep those in mind. I'll just use a little bit of paper towel, and you can wipe your fingers on.
Kind of feels like the meadow dirt.
Ooh, kind of like meadow dirt, and actually it is
I
very
can see this
close.
going up.
That's because you're holding it.
Slowly.
All right, so look on page 2.
My hand's 30 degrees.
Yeah, just 30 degrees. Okay, page 2 talks about the substrate, which is actually basically we're talking about the bottom of what's on the bottom of the pond there. And you guys just did such a great description of the substrate that you can feel. We're going to be able to circle what's, think it's native or introduced? Native. Yeah, it'd be kind of funny to have a big dump truck come along and dump us a bunch of mud, wouldn't it? That'd be weird. So, all right. So, you guys said it was soft.
It's silt.
Very good. It's silt. Silt is the finest, and it has that very soft feel to it. But you guys also said it was just a little bit, yeah, it had, well, a little bit of sand, I think. That sort of rough in it. Because they were both there. You felt the pebbly kind of thing. And when we look in the water here, remember we saw it when it was bubbling up, and I mentioned what was that was. We saw that coming up. Hey, was that, remember, gravel? Yeah, I mentioned that there was gravel bubbling up. So we've seen gravel. That's also part of the bottom, so you can circle that. So we did see that. Now, cobbles are a little bit bigger, but sometimes that also includes, we did see some, remember we were looking at that? We saw some bigger rocks out there. So there's some rocks out there too, some cobbles. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about this substrate. You may have also noticed when you had it in your hand, did you smell it at all? It's kind of stinky, huh? Yeah, kind of stinky. It's kind of stinky. If you were there and sniff at it, it's kind of stinky. And that's because there's things in here like plants that are decomposing. They're dead and they're becoming part of the soil again, and that actually makes them stink just a little bit. But it also means that there's less oxygen in here than there is in the rest of the water. And I tell you that because I'm going to tell you another something really special about pupfish. Pupfish lay eggs differently than other fish. Pupfish lay eggs one at a time, kind of like a chicken does. Most fish lay eggs in mass. Yeah, but pupfish will swim along, they'll lay one egg. Might even be the next day before they lay another egg. But it's always individually. And they want to make sure that those eggs are kind of protected, somewhere where they will have lots of air, and lots of oxygen, I should say, but they're protected. So, having given you that clue, how do you think they use the substrate? How do you think they use that sand and gravel? Very good. They use it for protecting their eggs. That's where they lay their eggs. That's where they lay their eggs. So if we're thinking of what happened to the pupfish, wow, if there wasn't enough area for them to lay their eggs, there probably wouldn't be many pupfish, right? But are there many? Is there a lot of sand and gravel and stuff in there?
Yeah.
Plenty. Oh dear. We haven't solved the problem yet, have we? We know the water's good. We know there's lots of plants. There's plenty of food to eat. Oh, Jess. See if anyone can guess. What do you think, CJ?
Algae?
They do eat some algae. What else do you think they eat?
Segmented worms?
Well, they might eat a few segmented worms. What do you think?
Scud?
They might eat a scud.
What
So,
are they
Based
called?
on their
called?
name, mosquito fish.
Mosquito fish.
What do you think they eat? They eat the mosquito larvae, yeah. And because they eat the larvae, and most of us don't like mosquitoes, people brought them here to eat the larvae. Okay, so what does that make them? Native or introduced?
Introduced.
Okay, so on the little fish, circle.
Are they native or introduced?
What about our bass here, the big mouth bass? Do you think they're native or introduced?
Introduced.
Nessa says introduced.
Native.
Well, you know, bass are really good fish for going fishing. Anybody fish for bass? Any of you guys fish for bass? And they're really good to eat. So they actually weren't here, but when the earlier settlers and the first people that came, who wanted to have farms and ranches and stuff here, they actually brought bass here because they like to eat them and they wanted to fish for them. And there's something, so they are introduced. They are not native.
Yeah, those bass are not native. They're introduced. People brought them here.
Here we have these nice bass, which are good fish. They're good to fish for. They're good to eat. But they were never here before. As a matter of fact, there weren't any really big fish here before. So the pupfish, and he was probably the biggest fish in the pond for a long time. And the males especially, because they want to protect their territory, they were used to going up to other male pupfish and just flashing around, and the other pupfish would go away. That's how they would defend their territory. So the other pupfish, okay, I'll go away because it's yours. So here they're used to doing that, and all of a sudden here's a big bass that's been introduced. Okay, here he comes. And the pupfish says, go away, go away, go away, get out of my territory. And the bass says, oh, you're awfully good. Opens his big mouth, and there goes the pupfish.
That's why they call them.
He ate it.
That's why
Yeah.
they call them big mouth bass.
That's why they call him big mouth bass, because they've got a big mouth and they could just swallow up that pupfish. So,
That's
what
why
do you
there's
think
none.
happened to the pupfish? Vanessa?
Because probably the big bad bass probably ate all of them.
Yes, the big mouth bass
They went
ate
extinct.
them. And they didn't quite go extinct, but they were missing for a long period of time. They didn't know where they were. Now, what about the mosquito fish? Now, they're not big enough to eat a bass, are they?
No.
No. Do you think they have any effect on the pupfish?
No.
Actually, they do. And we talked a little bit about they ate larvae, the same thing the pupfish eats. They eat algae. Isn't that the same thing the pupfish eat?
Yep.
So they kind of compete for food. But the other thing that they eat are little tiny things like eggs. And Owen's pupfish was extinct. And then at one point somebody saw some. And they got them and they gathered them up and they got them away from the bass and they put them in a very, very nice pond. And they were living there okay until something like what's been happening to us lately started happening a number of years ago.
A drought?
A drought.
Yeah.
Perfect. And that pond started drying up. And the biologist, the person who was taking care of the pupfish, came by and he realized that in a little while that pond was going to be completely dry. And of course pupfish have to have water, so they would all die. And he thought, and he went and he looked at a couple of other places. He found a bigger pond, a little bit deeper. He thought, well, if I can get those fish into that pond, maybe I can save them. So he got a couple of buckets, and he went back to the pond. He put water in the buckets, and he got as many pupfish, many of those Owen's pupfish as he could, and he put them into 2 buckets. And he picked up those buckets, and he had to carry those buckets by hand to the other pond. And as he was walking, one of the things that went through his mind is, oh my gosh, what if I were to trip? What if he were to spill all those pupfish? That would have been the end of that species. They wouldn't be around anymore. So he was very careful from there on, walking over to the other ponds. And when he got there, he put the fish and the water into that pond, and that's where they were able to stay. That was their refuge for a while. And I love that story for a couple of reasons. One, because I happen to love Owen's pupfish. I think they're adorable, and I love watching them, and I love watching them chase each other, which is where they got their name from. But I also love it because it reminds me that sometimes one person can make a big difference. One person, he managed all by himself to save an entire species. Pretty cool, huh? So don't let anybody ever tell you you can't make a difference. All right? Let's head off. We got to head back. Remember, single